These flies were used to catch the equally coveted and delicious blue shoal fish, which always fetched a handsome price at the market. Master Kossuth always took one off him whenever Ahren managed to catch some, and paid him with a large chunk of the delicious cheese he made so well. Ahren bent down to look for the flies, and was startled to see tooth and claw marks on the wooden box. Martens had feasted on his bait. Unfortunately, these pests had just as much a weakness for the God's Day flies as the blue shoal fish. They were called God's Day flies because they only hatched on the days of the gods, and died the same night. But if you caught them on the day, and locked them away so they couldn't see moonlight, then they would survive until the next God's Day, unless, of course, they served as bait for blue shoal fish. Ahren realized with exasperation that his full supply of flies was gone, which would have provided him with another 3 days' fishing. Snorting with anger, he flung the useless box into the river and put his rod on his shoulder. As he reached for his bucket with the day's catch, a despondency, such as he hadn't felt in a long time, came over him. His catch had been stolen too. He thought of what his father would say once he arrived home with no fish and no flies, not to mention a snapped fishing line, and felt a lump in his stomach. His backside was already sore at the mere thought of it. With slumped shoulders, he made his way homewards, a journey that suddenly felt terribly long. He beat his way through thick bush, and came out onto a small path which led from his home village of Deepstone and ran through the eastern forest. This was a small, dense forest, which snaked alongside the river like a green ribbon. While it took hardly any effort to reach the west side of the wood from the river-bank in less than an hour, it took 2 or 3 days' march to get through it by sticking to the river. That's what Falk, the forest guardian, said, anyway. A feeling of imminent disaster, caused by his father's scorn, hung over him, and it seemed to the 13-year-old that the wood was stretching itself out. An hour became a small eternity as he walked between the trees towards the sound hiding that was waiting for him. The sun set slowly in high summer and accompanied him on his return journey. It still wasn't dark when he stepped out from the trees and paused on the edge of the village. Deepstone clung to the edge of the forest and mirrored the eastern forest in its form. It was more than 10 times longer than it was wide. Each house was no more than a bowshot from the wood, for it hadn't taken long for the inhabitants to realize that the trees offered protection from the cold wind that swept over the hills of Eastland. A few had tried to build their wooden houses further away with little success. In the best-case scenario, this meant that twice the amount of wood was needed for heating in winter, and in the worst case, a family member would succumb to the Blue Death. Old Vera, the village healer, said the winter wind would then no longer want to leave the afflicted person's lungs. And indeed the howling of the winter wind could be heard again with every wheezing breath that passed between the blue lips of the victim. Ahren's mother had died in this way, shortly after his birth, too weak her body could offer no resistance to nor defy the Blue Death. Not one of the wailing houses, as they were called by the other inhabitants, was in use for more than one winter. Each and every family abandoned the house the following spring, and built a new one in the shelter of the wood instead. And so the little village resembled a small version of the protecting wood. The houses stood in a row, like a wooden pearl necklace, along the edge of the forest, in groups of no more than 4 or 5 houses together. The village population of Deepstone would never have amounted to its current 200 inhabitants, were it not for the fact that the land here was fertile and yielded a good harvest every year. Everything seemed still. It was high time for supper, and of course it would have been blue shoal fish on the table at home today, if